Hello guys, for plant reviews today, 20th of May, so last day of mid-spring or first day of early spring, and I'll talk now about irises, just an introduction. Irises is a genus in the family Iridaceae and is the largest one with about 300 species. Iris comes from the Greek word for rainbow, and is also the name of the Greek goddess of the rainbow. And that's because irises comes in a variety of colors, and actually also they are quite different in shape. Sorry, I'm trying to get this grass out of the flower. And irises are perennial plants that can be either bulbous or rhizomatous. Perfect examples of these two different habits of irises are the two most common irises kept in gardens: the Dutch iris, like this one, that is a bulbous plant, and the bearded irises, the German irises, Iris germanica, as this one instead. These plants are mostly distributed in the northern hemisphere, in particular North America, Europe, and Asia. The type species is Iris cross germanica. That indeed is not a species, but Linnaeus thought it was a species, and is actually a cross of Iris pallida, the Croatian iris. The irises are some of the most popular flowers to be kept in gardens, as I said, due to the incredible variety of colors, and most of them are very hardy in the UK indeed. The leaves are sword shaped, as you can see in rhizomatous iris, like the bearded irises, the German bearded irises, or otherwise they are quite more narrow, almost cylindrical, as in the bulbous irises. The irises also are divided in different subgenuses, including Xiphium, like the Dutch iris, the bulbous iris, or as the type species, type genus iris, the bearded iris. Some of the irises are also very fragrant, including some of the most common kept bearded iris, while some others are not fragrant, as the Dutch iris. Blooming time for irises varies according to the species. Some irises can bloom in winter, like for example the bulbous irises of the many bulbous irises of Turkey, such as Iris reticulata and Iris danfordia, or for example some rhizomatous iris as well of North Africa. Some others bloom mostly in spring, early, mid, or late spring. Some of them actually in arriving to early summer. However, most of them bloom in spring. The flower is usually at the top of quite a long stem, and there's different flower arrangements according to the species. Dutch irises have usually one set of flowers at the top of the stem, while other irises, like in the German irises, flowers are born in 3 or 4 groups. However, all irises have a basal shape of a structure of 3 basically units that are the 3 sepals and 3 petals. The sepals of the irises are called falls, and they usually droop downwards. I can show you better on this plant. So this is the sepal of the iris, of this bearded iris, and basically it is connected at the base by a claw or haft, and now we're part connecting it to the flower stem. and there is this broader area that is the blade of the fall. Many irises have rich veining in the falls. Some others are also veined on the standards. On the fall, some irises, like for example this beautiful bearded iris indeed, have a beard that is basically an area where some projections called filaments make this structure that can serve as an additional grip when insects are trying to look for nectar at the end of this kind of tunnel. The anthers, the male part of the flower, is indeed in this tunnel. This is a style arm. The style arm is the stigma of the iris. Is actually completely different from the stigma in other plants. Indeed, what acts as stigmatic part is this very narrow shelf on this petaloid stigma. Hopefully you can see it here, and if you see these whitish granules here, this is because I just hand pollinated this flower. So that's the petaloid or stigmatic area, and this is very useful for the pollination because when the insects land on the flower, usually first get in contact with this with the stigma, so releasing the pollen, and then tries to go in the tube constituted by the fall and the the stigma, this petaloid stigma, and it gets the pollen from the anther. So in this way the plant avoids the self-pollination. Again, you can see the anthers here and the stigma here, just below these two projection of this petaloid stigma. The petals instead, they go upwards and they're called standards. Standards can be also richly colored, sometimes veined as well, and some irises have different colors in the standards and in the falls. This happens both in species and in hybrids. For example, I have at the back a beautiful plant in bloom. This is the Iris poem of ecstasy, and you can see how the standards are differently colored from the falls. There's a very light peach on the standards, while the falls are really huge and lilac. Many irises are fragrant, and especially the German irises, many varieties have an incredible fragrance, very sweet. I never found much difference on fragrance in iris varieties, as for example I can find in roses. However, I enjoy very much the iris fragrance. It's a very sweet and quite powerful. You can smell it. I would say, yeah, 1 meter far from the plant. It is a really nice fragrance, and irises are beautiful, as most irises are beautiful as cut flowers, and even if the single unit of of 3 flowers it's not very long lived, they come up in stems of, as you can see, of 3-4 units of flowers, and they usually last about 1 week and a half. It's a pity that they are not long lived, however, especially if you have a large clump of irises. You can see what a beautiful display can make in the garden. Cultivation tips: irises, the most common irises grown in gardens, as I said, the German iris, the German bearded iris, and the Dutch irises like full sun. Now it's afternoon, so the sun is almost setting, and yeah, some trees are giving a bit of shade in the last couple of hours of the day. However, this garden is in full sun, and my irises really enjoy this garden. The Dutch iris, you can see that is not a bearded iris and is not fragrant, and this is also a cross of different species of irises in the genus Xiphium, while the bearded irises, as you can see, come in a wider variety of colors in comparison to the Dutch irises, and they have the bonus that are fragrant. So cultivation tips again: full sun, very well drained soil for these two irises. They really can't stand waterlogged conditions, and considering that these irises have flowers on long stems, they need kind of a sheltered area away from strong winds. Otherwise, you need to stake or support the flower stems in a different way. Indeed, as you can see, I didn't stake these bearded irises, and basically you can see how the stems basically fell over almost horizontally. I will take a better picture for here, while luckily some irises have a better support from some weeds around and they are able to stand very much upright indeed. It's not ideal for irises being around weeds because they really like full sun, especially the rhizomes need to be exposed to the suns. You have to plant in German irises the rhizomes very superficially with the dorsal part of the tuber of the rhizome actually out of the ground. That's the best way. And ideally, if you live in an area that is a bit wet, try to build like a kind of mound and put the rhizome at the top of it, because irises, especially German irises, can stand dry conditions very well, but really can't stand waterlogged condition, and if it's too wet the rhizomes will rot. I had a couple of irises rotting just because they were in an area with a bit too much shade near other plants, and so the evaporation after watering was not ideal. The ground kept too much water and they just rotted. Unfortunately, one of them was the Dracula's Kiss, one of my favorites, and it even bloomed, and it rotted after bloom. So at least I enjoyed the beautiful blooming, but I had to buy another Dracula's Kiss rhizome to replace it. Obviously, I planted it in a different area. These irises, the most common irises kept in gardens, there are the Dutch iris and the German irises, are hardy, fully hardy in the UK, as I said, so they can stand even freezing conditions without any problem, as long as the soil is well drained. And well, you can see yourself how beautiful the flower displays of a big group of irises is. I hope you enjoyed the video, and hope to see you next time. And if you like my videos, it would be great if you can please subscribe. See you next time. Bye.